by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. Ah, how sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead. Where the thin blue line meets razor's edge. And where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death and drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into section step by step till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs. All laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer, that 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers, who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still, the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer. Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. fed one straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unstead, and your eyes turn blind to the signs on red. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see it, it's fed. Never your mind, that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, that it bleeds you dry, that it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Mother and baby on razor's edge. Don't give a shit what your paper said. Economy creeping up out of red. They divvy a shit little bit of bread. Miles away from that lady's ledge. Her senator waking safe and fed. Ain't got a paper to read in bed. Jerking them off as they count the dead. Gorillas in the mist, skin suits in the Senate. Water in the streets, chest deep like it's Venice. Water out a tap in Jackson comes blacker than resin. Black incidentally like most of its residents, which is why it isn't on your television, isn't on the lips of your president. Well, I'm admitting that as evidence. I've been fleshing out a case to be made for the testament. I don't know what our collateral count is, but doubt it is less than the estimate. You just show us a hospital, watch as we Dresden it. Our propaganda gets taken to heart, and you're scarfing it, like it or not. If you think that you aren't, I would urge you to pick that apart, cause you're drinking it, smoking it, driving it, dressed in it. We pay for it, pray to it, bathe in it, fill up the basin, and babies are blessed in it. Ask no questions, bask in the pestilence. See, honey, when the plague goes live, you'd be wise to invest in it. See, honey, when the plague goes live, just between you and I, that's an industry sign that they're all done testing it. And come 2025, they will all be confessing it. And then a few small fry fall guys all fly from the precipice, who are doomed to be wasted like shell corporations, dissolving to vapor, then gone with the resonance, gone with the sense and the sentiments, gone with the dust of the remnants, gone with the ghosts of the regiment, gone like those families in Gaza whose bodies and homes are demolished with Israel sets up a settlement. Gone like your chance at a settlement. Gone like the hope of apologies. Out of those funding our deadliest research and backroom development. Gone like your shot at a measly I'm sorry from the mouths of our own bioterrorists. God, you cannot imagine the face of the monster. You can't even fathom the scale of its carapace. It's under your feet, yet you're barely aware of it. You see it's quietly judging the scope of your suffering, sizing you up like a therapist. Then it rides in your guts like a parasite, growing in size and excreting a culture that's purely embarrassment. Equal parts Manson and Maryland, equal parts something we push into madness and something we'll gladly exploit and objectify 50 years after it perishes. Carefully crafted and planned and arranged like a monarchy's marriages. Fucking cousins or otherwise, scourge of the colonized, staged and displayed for the sake of retaining those imperial barracks. And all to expedite a special type of anglicized dysplasia. The kind where half the world is waking up to learn they're being raided, raped, and robbed of all their heritage by Charles and his caravan of 30 servants' carriages. The kind where each in the procession is worth infinitely less, till eventually they're paid in sums of crown-approved disparagement and bonuses of shame, till they're finally told to thank the highest-ranking inbred pig named king of every garrison. One who rose into his power all immaculate, like Harris did. Well, now that garishness is melting down like paraffin that hardens in a shell and shelters terrified and threatened royal terrapin. Those that rule with zero question, although nobody elected it. To Democracy was here till we dissected it. Democracy was here until the exhibition exodus. And the loss of that democracy is just a threat for those who've yet to recognize the scent of bait or know the taste of desiccants. Democracy was here and now the smear is all that's left of it.
Democracy was here and now the smear is all that's left of it.
Mother and baby on razor's edge, don't give a shit what your paper said. Economy creeping up out of red as they divvy a shitty little bit of bread. And miles away from that lady's ledge, her senator waking, he's safe and fed. And Aid got a paper to read in bed, jerking him off as they count the dead. Mother and baby on razor's edge, don't give a shit what your paper said. Economy creeping up out of red as they divvy a shitty little bit of bread. And miles away from that lady's ledge, her senator waking, he's safe and fed. Aid got a paper to read in bed, jerking him off as they count the dead. Mother and baby on razor's edge, they don't give a shit what your paper said. Economy creeping up out of red as they divvy a shitty little bit of bread. And miles away from that lady's ledge, her senator waking, he's safe and fed. Aid got a paper to read in bed, jerking him off as they count the dead. Mother and baby on razor's edge, don't give a shit what your paper said. The economy creeping up out of red as they divvy a shitty little bit of bread. And miles away from that lady's ledge, her senator waking, he's safe in bed. And Aid got a paper to read in bed, jerking him off as they count the dead. Mother and baby on razor's edge, they don't give a shit what your paper said. The economy creeping up out of red as they divvy a shitty little bit of bread. And miles away from that lady's ledge, her senator waking, he's safe in bed. And Aid got a paper to read in bed, jerking him off as they count the dead.
When you are not with where majority of Americans are, then, you know, that is extreme. That is an extreme way of thinking.
Set you free, but I really want to let you be. And a part of me wished I could set myself aside, just let you take the ride, just chalk the rest up to destiny. I could let you believe that the only restraints in life are the size of your dreams. Let you believe each kid grows up with the world at their feet. When I know too well it's open season, I know they're taking stock and raising stocks and raising stock. And I'm simply not here to sit and watch as you learn the lesson all cogs are taught. Keep your head down and keep to task and just keep on blocking the rest of it all out. Just keep on with the rest of the herd of a million adjacent oblivious workers. The forest unseen for the trees, and the trees unseen for the fallout. No, what's more damning, baby, the truth or the
ignorance? Who are these people?
Welcome, everybody, to INN News. My name is Reef Breland. This is my lovely Care Bear co-host, Collin Radix-Carter.
Hello. Hey-o.
Hope everyone is doing okay. As we all know,
it is Wednesday, my dudes.
In case you were wondering what day it was.
Where's that from, by the way?
It's an old internet meme. It's one of the better ones.
Okay.
You'd have to look it up. Like it's literally that. Like that's the whole thing. But we brought stories this week.
We did.
Sure
did.
There they are. I got stories.
So given that and I know people reported on this already, but given that over the weekend it was MLK weekend, so obviously there's a lot of talk online and otherwise about Dr. Martin Luther King, and so we are going to talk about him in regards to Biden actually going to MLK's church to preach a sermon, which in that is problematic in of itself for other reasons besides what you can think of. But I actually got inspired to do this in like a movie, like another movie poster inspiration. So that's
nice.
Where you get this thumbnail here. Another one of my favorites, I might add, with some help from me.
And then you got this right here.
And then we've been talking a lot about striking or wanting to strike, and SCOTUS can probably get it. So there's an interview that was done, I think, over a week ago in regards to another case that's in court in regards to workers striking, and the repercussions of that could be kind of disastrous for everyone else. So we are going to talk about that. And what do you got, Reef?
I got to continue the MLK Day stories. I've got some messages from the Poor People's Campaign, which is one of MLK's organization that still stands. And see what they have to say about that. And so that should be good. And I also brought over the weekend there was a protest with Greta. Greta was there, Greta. And it may not be everything that it seems, you know. I know it gives all my like eco-loving friends the nice warm fuzzies, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So, but yeah, that's what I brought. So
thank you, fam, for coming in, tuning in. I know there are probably other people that you wanted to watch tonight, but so we're very grateful.
Yeah.
Watching us. So please
Appreciate
share the stream, subscribe. Definitely subscribe, because I think YouTube is still doing its mess of possibly kicking some of you off, our subscription list. So double check. If not, subscribe. If not, subscribe anyway. We really appreciate the help, especially over the last 2 weeks that we're now monetized. But yeah, thank you so much, for your support. And so let's get started with this story. So over the weekend, it was Martin Luther King weekend, and those of you who may not know, Senator, newly minted Senator Raphael Warnock is actually now the pastor of what is MLK's church in Atlanta, and who happens to show up to do a sermon of all weekends is none other than our president, Joe Biden. And I said earlier, this is problematic for reasons, which I'll get into. But one of the rare times I'm actually going to read something from mainstream media and NPR, written by Gulia Hayward. Sorry, I totally blanked on her name. Where she states that Biden becomes the first sitting president to deliver a Sunday sermon at MLK's church. Now, keep in the fact that it's first, as she says, I think is very significant, and we'll get to more of a reason for that in a minute. But she continues. Joe Biden delivered a sermon on Sunday at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, becoming the first sitting president to do so at the church where Martin Luther King Jr. was a pastor. I've spoken before Parliament, kings, queens, leaders of the world. I've been doing this for a long time, Biden said. But this is intimidating. King served as a pastor of the historic church until his assassination in 1968 at the age of 39. Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock, who is the church's pastor, invited the president to deliver the sermon on what would have been King's 94th birthday. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a nonviolent warrior for justice who followed the word and the way of his Lord and Savior, Biden said. On this day of remembrance, we gather at Dr. King's church, Ebenezer. During the speech, which lasted for roughly 25 minutes, Biden touched on both King's faith and his commitment to equality. The president said he felt humbled to achieve the historic milestone. He spoke of King's legacy and called the Reverend one of his heroes. But the sermon quickly turned political as Biden discussed economic issues and voting rights. This is a time of choosing of the direct choices we have, Biden continued. Are we a people who choose democracy over autocracy? Prior to the sermon, Biden released a proclamation on Friday reflecting on the holiday and similarly touching on voting rights and healthcare. Biden said his administration is calling on Congress to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. In keeping with Dr. King's campaign for economic justice and the rights of workers, note that my administration is striving to make the American dream a reality for every family, Biden said in the proclamation. During his speech, Biden said that the battle for the soul of this nation continues today. He discussed a range of current affairs, including the recent appointment of the Supreme Court's first Black female justice and the political turmoil in Brazil. Biden concluded his speech by describing a bust of King that currently lies in the Oval Office, reiterating that King is one of his inspirations. There's also another bust in his office, according to Biden, of Rosa Parks. Not sure if that's true, but okay. The president once again asked listeners to continue to work towards the country's progress. Folks, for God's sakes, this is the United States of America, Biden said. There's nothing beyond our capacity if we set our mind to it. Any thoughts, Reef, before I begin to go into Biden a little bit and Warnock as well?
I mean, it's just the fact of like pure political theater for while also pissing off the same people you're trying to pander to.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, also like, oh. Like, anyway, I'm sure we're going to have some lovely Bidenisms thrown in here too. So, you know.
Actually, that is the article. But here's why this is problematic from, you could say, more of a financial standpoint, you could say.
Mm.
So Biden actually gave a sermon, and he actually gave a sermon, like he went political, as he said. There's a reason why there's something called separation of church and state.
Yes.
Because according to the IRS, right, and if you zoom in, like churches are tax exempt, right?
Yeah.
So under the Internal Revenue Code, all Section 501c3 organizations, that includes churches, right, are absolutely prohibited from, scroll down a bit, or get rid of your screen.
Oh.
Thank you. I'll bring it up. Thank you.
Sorry.
All Section 501c3 organizations are absolutely prohibited from directly or indirectly participating in or intervening in any political campaign on behalf of or in opposition to any candidate for elective public office. Now, you can argue, I haven't heard the speech, don't care to hear it, but two things that you can kind of say are problematic with this. First of all, you know, the fact that, as you said, I think it's definitely virtual signaling to one, Biden's base, predominantly older Black base, who are pretty much guaranteed voters in Georgia, which is kind of teetering on red and blue at the moment. So the idea that he's doing this, it wasn't, you can argue it wasn't to necessarily give props to Dr. King. It was more of a virtual signal towards voters come next year. Just to be like, hey, I came to MLK's church and I gave a sermon. Vote for me. I'm not going to do shit for you, but vote for me anyway. So that's just kind of the thought that I had, in terms of Biden, which is significant that he is the first one.
Yeah.
And this, according to the IRS, is probably why, in terms of this is being problematic and, kind of overstepping his bounds, as president to be able to do something like this, given that this is a church and in very fact of MLK's church at that. So I thought it was very significant that I heard some murmurs of this because that's immediately what I thought of being in church and actually having pastors who said directly to the congregation, especially like back in 2016, that they weren't going to talk about anything political in regards to anything of their sermons. I shout out to my former pastors who made that very clear that that's what they're not going to do. But the fact that Warnock himself, so don't worry, I'm not forgetting about you, Warnock, I'm getting at you. Now, the fact that he did this, as far as, kind of, again, more virtual signaling to his congregation, like, hey, I got the president for you. Obviously, it's going to get a lot of press. Obviously, it's going to get a lot of attention, and it's just a way for his congregation to say, oh, Biden spoke at our church. God bless you, whatever else it was like. So, look, I grew up in church, so.
Yeah, like I know that lady. You're doing.
Right. So, but, and not to say I've studied Dr. King, but especially being a teacher and more particularly, with preschool, having the opportunity to even right now to talk to my students about Dr. King right now and having to think about this a little bit more in depth. It's interesting that whenever people talk about Dr. King, it's always in terms of, oh, he was a peaceful man. Oh, he was in church. He wanted equality for everybody. All that. Even as far as the children's books that I read kind of mention all of that, which I think is fine for kids. But I think many of many of our audience knows there's a more radical side to Dr. King, especially post I Had a Dream speech, where he goes into the issues of capitalism and our government in terms of their responsibility in terms of Black liberation, which he talked about very frequently up until his death. That is almost never mentioned in mainstream media and certainly not in the mainstream of consciousness as far as what we know about Dr. King. And had Warnock, I'm sure Warnock did his homework, I'm sure Warnock knows about this, but he failed not to kind of mention that or has promoted this at all, to my knowledge, in regards to Biden being in office, where if Warnock was being more of a badass, he probably would have played something like this. So if you go ahead and roll this video, please.
Yes, sir.
Tired of marching for something that should have been mine at first. I have a dream.
That dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare.
We have stood up for nonviolence with all of our hearts, and those who will make this peaceful revolution impossible will make a violent revolution inevitable.
I have no sympathy at all for destroying your own communities.
I think we've got to see that a riot is the language of the unheard.
Rioting is not protesting. No, it's not what Dr. King or John Lewis taught.
Riots are caused by nice, gentle, timid white moderates who are more concerned about order than justice.
I am a supporter of the death penalty without the racial justice provision in it.
Who can always say to the Negro, you're pushing things too fast, wait for a more convenient season.
I also don't think we should get too far ahead of ourselves on dealing with police reform.
Something must be done to end this kind of unnecessary abuse of police power and what we see as outright police brutality.
President Trump says that you want to defund the police. Do you?
No, I don't. I think they need more help. This is about protecting everybody across the board.
A Democratic president wants 100,000 cops.
We've got some difficult days ahead, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Yeah. So if Warnock wanted to be, as I said, if Warnock wanted to be really petty, he would have played this.
Yeah.
Honestly, but it kind of, and this video is from Too Far Left. Shout out to them for making this video, but I think it truly shows the dichotomy of what Biden says that Dr. King was about versus what, he actually spoke on, which I think is very interesting. So I don't want to get too much more into Dr. King because we are going to talk about him later with your segment at the end of the show. But I did find this, which I thought was interesting. So this is a thread from Angela Rye. Those of you who know Angela Rye, she is a lawyer, kind of a shit-lib. She's been on the Breakfast Club many times, but sometimes, more often than not, she does have good takes on things. And I saw this over the weekend, so I thought it was interesting enough to pull up and share. So if you remove your screen, please.
Yeah.
So Angela Rye tweeted out on Monday, "I had a dream that one day the world will also recognize that Dr. King said, whenever Pharaoh wanted to prolong the period of slavery in Egypt, he had a favorite formula of doing it. What was that? He kept the slaves fighting among themselves." Hold on. Yeah. "But whenever the slaves get together, something happens in Pharaoh's court, and he cannot hold the slaves in slavery. When the slaves get together, that's the beginning of getting out of slavery. Now let us maintain unity." Now, the other thing we have to do is this: always anchor our external direct action with the power of economic withdrawal. Now, we are poor people individually. We are poor when you compare us with white society in America. We are poor. Never stop and forget that collectively, that means all of us together, collectively, we are richer than all the nation in the world, with the exception of 9. Did you ever think about that? After you leave the United States, Soviet Russia, Great Britain, West Germany, France, and I could name the others, the Negro collectively is richer than most nations of the world. We have an annual income of more than $30 billion a year, which is more than all the exports of the United States and more than the national budget of Canada. Did you know that? That's power right there if we know how to pool it. So this was the speech he gave. I see the Promised Land during the Memphis sanitation workers strike and the day before he was killed. So the peaceful, meek, passive Dr. King really doesn't exist in terms of what most people think of him.
Yeah.
So like I said, we're going to talk a little bit more about him in depth. But again, the fact that, as I said in the show notes, that he basically desecrated his church, because I'm sure MLK, either one or two things, would not have allowed him to come in that church, or if he did, would have had some words for someone like Biden to come in there and kind of speak all this virtual signaling. Again, the idea, like he talked about voting, and yet we vote for things as far as universal health care and all these other progressive issues that he's not giving us. And Warnock is just basically going along with it for his own political career. So he basically went with his party instead of his congregation in terms of having someone who has been the means of their suffering, allowing to speak in his church. So basically both of them are shit for that, but more so Warnock for allowing that to happen, given I'm sure Warnock is intelligent enough to know how Biden is, and yet he still chose to invite him into that church anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, it brings us to our next story, which is, what does that justice look like? Which we talk about frequently. So this is from the Poor People's Campaign, right? They're trying to, especially for MLK Day, they're wanting to essentially say there's still work to be done. Like, and that should be the focus of the day, which we also mentioned in our last story. But so this was put by was this Common Dreams? Why did I not put it in the
yeah, it's Common Dreams.
Okay, well, I forget if it was Brett or not. I think it was.
It is Brett.
So which we had on the show recently.
We
Go
had
look
on
at
the
those
show,
clips.
friends of the show, and we interviewed him last week. So check YouTube on our page to find our interview with Brett Wilkins.
And links to all articles we've used are in the description below for every clip. Our job is to pick up the baton, says Poor People's Campaign on MLK Day. Today and every day, let's honor King as we end racism, poverty, ecological devastation, the denial of health care, militarism, and this false narrative of Christian nationalism, says Reverend Dr. Liz Thea Harris. Right? So, to mark Martin Luther King Day, on Monday, leaders of a modern iteration of the slain civil rights champion's final campaign called on U.S. politicians from both sides of the aisle, many of whose policies and actions are like those King condemned as the evil triplets of racism, materialism, and militarism, to step up and meet the needs of the country's poor and low-income people. The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral review, released a video demanding the Biden administration and every member of Congress meet with poor and low-wealth people, religious leaders, economists, lawyers, and public health specialists to address the system policy violence that threatens the soul of our nation. So, I have a bit of that video. If everyone would like to watch with us, they can do so. So, I think I have this and this. There we go.
We really can't call ourselves celebrating prophets. That's really not the biblical way. When prophets are killed or assassinated, our job is to pick up the baton and continue the work. Every round must continue to go higher. We cannot be at ease in Zion by celebrating the fights and victories won in the past without engaging the battles today. Sadly, many will go to King events today and claim to honor the prophet because dead prophets are easy to be honored. And many of them on both sides of the aisle will go, while even today they are standing diametrically opposed to the things he fought for: addressing systemic poverty, addressing racism, ensuring voter protection, just immigration policies, just treatment of Native Americans, health care for all, and dealing with the war economy and militarism. And so today, the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, want to remind you of that. The campaign, called by Mary Wright Edelman and welfare rights women and embraced by Dr. King and many others, said that America can't truly be who she claims to be as long as there are 2 and 3 Americas. but one America that has everything it needs, and another America that suffers day in and day out. We cannot be satisfied when over the last 2 years we have seen some moral absurdities. We've seen far too many Republicans gleefully glad to get power so they can support an autocratic leadership and greed and lust of for-profit mechanisms, and so that they can engage in retrogression to roll back rights that have already been won. And too many Democrats are too gleeful over compromised successes that, yes, have done some things that we supported, but have not finished the job. We can't be satisfied when 52 senators, 50 Republicans, 2 Democrats, said no to 55 million Americans and refused to vote and pass a living wage, even though we've not raised the living wage since 2009. We can't be satisfied when 52 senators said no to health care for all people, even though they get free health care because they got elected, paid for by the people. And even though 700 people died a day from poverty, 250,000 a year before COVID, and during COVID, 330,000 people died. Not because they caught COVID, but because they didn't have health care to address the disease. We cannot be satisfied. As long as 52 senators, Democrats and Republicans, blocked Restoring the Voting Rights Act, which continues to allow states to pass voter suppression without any form of pre-clearance, redistricting plans that are racist in their intent and suppressive in their application. Where even now there's a bill coming out of North Carolina arguing for legislative sovereignty that says once a state legislature passes bills on voting, no one can overturn it, particularly out of the state courts. That's not going forward, that's going backward. That's not the dream, that's the nightmare. We cannot be satisfied when 52 senators, Democrat and Republican, voted against the passage of the John Lewis for the People Act. And at least one of those senators, a Democrat, told John Lewis before he passed it, he supported the bill. But in the wake of his death, chose to follow the way of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and others, rather than protect the right to vote. The democracy is just not under threat because of what happened on January 6th. January 6th happens in many ways because we too often continue to compromise with lies, which only empowers extremism. Just a few days ago, some economists were suggesting that the way to deal with the inflation was to have more unemployment. In other words, make the people who already suffer more rather than making the wealthy pay their fair share. As long as that reality and this kind of regressivism exists, then our movement must grow. It must intensify. It must be emboldened. We must be committed to legislation, litigation, mobilization, and if necessary, nonviolent action. But what we cannot and will not do is be silent or unseen anymore.
What do you think?
I mean,
like, could he be more spot on? Like,
right. That's who Warnock should have had, honestly.
Yes. Yes.
Which is funny, like, you know, and those of you who don't know, Reverend Barber is actually heading the organization that Dr. King started.
Like, he brought it back.
So why is it that Warnock did not invite him? So that's kind of questionable to me, you know? But yeah, it's just
when he talked about, like, he talked about the stuff that King did that people don't talk about a lot, you know?
Right.
You know, Roger Meadows with a $2 tip on Rockfin. I just got on 20 minutes in talking about Warnock being terrible. I agree. I am so pissed that my schools taught me the 1963 MLK, not the 1968 MLK. Collin, are you allowed to teach the 1968 MLK to your kids without getting a call from the superintendent?
I'll say this. Listen, look, because I teach little kids, it's okay. I feel like for me, I have the grace to. They don't necessarily need to know the full details of Dr. King in the way that we know him at that age.
Yeah.
But I will say, like last year, funny enough, like when I was talking about Dr. King, I didn't say it, but I had very astute kids that were able to put two and two together. Like, and during, I don't remember like the full details of the conversation that we had, but a couple of them asked me, well, Mr. RC, why did the government kill Dr. King?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't teach that. I did not explicitly say that. They figured that out on their own, you know? And I basically explained to them, you know, like, there are people in government, you know, that did not like Dr. King because he was teaching a message of equality that that many people did not like at that time and still don't. So I think for me, it's a matter of teaching that message, even though it's about the equality type of thing, but the idea that people did not like that, I think is okay, at least for the kids that I have, you know, how young they are. But my hope is that, you know, as they get older, they get to know the fullness of the Dr. King post, you know, I Had a Dream speech, where he does attack capitalism, where he does, you know, talk about the injustices, especially regarding Black people, you know, that he was really trying to promote more of that liberation, you know, for us. So,
yeah.
So to answer that question,
just for the kids, Oz in the chat with a $2 super sticker. Appreciate you, fam.
Thank you. But you know, so I will say this. I can only lead in a certain way, but I hope to kind of talk about it in a way that want to have students learn more about him. And then they can be able to go deeper on their own if they choose to. So, but yeah, but I think that needs to be changed as far as what we do share about Dr. King, because, you know, as I said, he wasn't a passive preacher who talked about being, you know, like he talked about revolution.
William Barber continues, when prophets are killed or assassinated, our job is to pick the baton and continue the work, right? Sadly, many will go to King's events today and claim to honor the prophet. Elected officials on both sides of the aisle will go, while even today they are standing diametrically opposed to the things he fought for, addressing systemic poverty, addressing racism, ensuring voter protection, just immigration policy, just treatment of indigenous people, healthcare for all, and dealing with the war economy and militarism. Anthony Malecki in the chat with a $10 super chat. Congrats on 1K subs. Yep. If you haven't subbed already, feel free to add to that number.
And thank you, Anthony, for being such a huge supporter of us.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you. Love you.
Appreciate you, fam. So, as they do each year, officials, including Republican lawmakers who voted against an MLK Day holiday, the U.S. government King called the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, and its agencies like the FBI that tried to destroy King all took to Twitter to sing his praises, which I'm sure you saw all those on Twitter. But here is one of the other members of the Poor People's Campaign giving her words. And
we really can't call ourselves.
What? I thought I said it to start right.
Way. And COVID death. More than half
is be silent or unseen.
Right.
Anymore.
Why? Sometimes I hate slides, you know? Like, they're kind of the worst. Ooh, Jax Page with a $5 super chat saying congrats for 1K subs. Appreciate you. Can I get this to do what I need it to, please?
We really can't.
Okay, there. It finally did what I needed it to. Jesus Christ.
Nonviolent.
Economic rights, not simply economic rights. Martin Luther King Day.
There we go.
Is be silent or unseen anymore.
This Martin Luther King Day, we must continue a campaign for social, political, and economic rights, not simply commemorate a man. In the state of New York, where I live, more than half of all kids are poor and low income. More than 1 in 4 workers, 2.3 million people, make less than $15 an hour. Health insurance gaps are associated with nearly 10,000 COVID deaths. And New York State public schools, the same schools my kids go to, are some of the most segregated in the country. But it doesn't have to be this way. What we learned from Dr. King and the welfare rights leaders and Appalachian families, migrant farm workers, and other poor and impacted people who organized the 1968 Poor People's Campaign is that the very social force capable of challenging abandonment amidst abundance, poverty amidst plenty, is a fusion movement of poor and low-income people, clergy, activists, and advocates who can move forward together and not one step back. Today and every day, let's honor King as we end racism, poverty, ecological devastation, the denial of healthcare, militarism, and this false narrative of Christian nationalism. Let us fight poverty, not the poor.
Hi, my name is
How about I do this? God, what is wrong with me? Sound. So that was Reverend Liz Theoharis, right? Co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. The video also includes messages from low-income Americans and advocates calling for healthcare, living wages, and more so everyone can thrive. I linked the article down in the description below. People can find the full video on that includes those messages. But one of them included, I live in North Carolina. I work 60 hours a week and more, and I still don't make enough money to live comfortably. Matthew Byers said in the video, I'm chasing the American dream, but I'm living the American nightmare. Raise the minimum wage. Impacted people matter too. So we talked about this a little bit in our last story, but King, along with the Southern Christian Leaders Conference, launched the original Poor People's Campaign in December 1967, months before he was assassinated in Memphis, while supporting a strike by black sanitation workers. King said the movement's demands were $30 billion for anti-poverty programs, full employment for all, a guaranteed universal income, and the annual construction of 500,000 affordable homes. I think we also covered, Collin, the Poor People's March not too long ago, but I think it was the same organization.
Yes.
So were you there for that? I don't remember if you made it to that.
No, I heard about it too late.
So SCLC President Ralph Abernathy led the campaign after King's murder, and in May 1968, just weeks after King's murder, his widow, Coretta Scott King, led demonstrators in a 2-week protest in Washington, D.C., where participants demanded an economic Bill of Rights. So that was this. Do you remember Resurrection City in 1968? So there it is. Look at all the people there. Like, oh my God, it's you. That had to have been you. You were like that age then. You're a little older than
No,
that.
I wasn't even alive then.
Yeah, I know, right?
That would be more like my older brothers and
I got
sisters.
9 children going to school now, and we'll have 11 in September. And I had been to the welfare to see could I get help, and they wouldn't help. And I really need help.
A lot of people knew the condition of some of these places, and I think that when they see and know the condition, that a lot of people will be interested enough to try to make things better.
I hope the nation understands that even with the problems here, that people ate 3 meals a day for the first time and had health care for the first time in their lives.
We will go to Senator Long. He may not want to hear us. As he keeps hollering law and order, as the Johnson administration always have preached, law and order must be preserved. But where in the hell is justice?
We are going to plague the pharaohs of this nation with plague after plague until they decide to give us some meaningful jobs and a guaranteed annual income.
That was 1968.
Yeah.
Like any of those things happened since then?
No.
No.
Well, but that's why Dr. King called his dream a nightmare.
Yes.
Because he said that, I don't want to say he necessarily had rose-colored glasses at that point, but I think he might have said it in the hope that things would improve, especially with the passing of the Civil Rights Act, and kind of seeing how that passed and things didn't change significantly. I think that's basically when he was like, the gloves came off at that point. I was just kind of like, no, fuck this, like, enough being nice. I want to speak what I really want to say.
Right.
And that ultimately led to his assassination.
Well, you brought me this Twitter thread today that kind of goes right into that. So this is at Tamanisha John, I think, right? And she's quoting Derek Purnell, who also deleted all these, I think.
Yeah.
Like you can't find them, right?
Apparently can't, but at least they're here.
Right.
This way,
So the United States has convinced so many people that MLK Day is a day of service. Martin Luther King wasn't interested in service. He was interested in the redistribution of wealth to render poverty obsolete, less service, more redistribution. He was called the most dangerous man in America by the FBI, not because he was interested in community service, but because he was promoting anti-militarism and anti-capitalism. On MLK and MLK Day at Derek A. Purnell, he was organizing a poor people's campaign to use direct action against the U.S. government for maintaining economic inequality, not to help out poor people, but to end the idea of poor people. People will remind us that King practiced nonviolence. That is a half-truth. Martin Luther King practiced nonviolent direct action. He and others physically put their bodies on the line against the U.S. government, against state and local governments, and against the police. The direct action is often left out because the people we protest against want you to think that nonviolence means inaction, and it does not. Nonviolence also does not mean peaceful. They don't want nonviolent direct action. They don't want any action at all. So yes, clean your neighborhoods, plant your flowers, donate, or whatever other service you want to do. But if you want to be in King's tradition of building a beloved community, join an organization, do political education, engage in NVDA, call out racism, capitalism, and militarism.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I couldn't find it. I found something. Another Kwame Ture pick. We're not going to play him today. But, Kwame met with Dr. King and talked with Dr. King. And so, and the clip that I found was, the sound was piss poor, so you wouldn't have been able to hear it. But Kwame basically said, if you love Dr. King, you would join an organization. Now, the issue that I had, the slight critique, because I love me some Mr. Ture. Like he mentioned, join like the NAACP and all these other, which back then were great.
Yeah.
But now they're not they're basically arms of the DNC.
Yeah.
So considering what he was saying at the time, sure, that made a lot of sense back then. Not so much now. But I think the idea he was saying then was, you know, don't say you love Dr. King. And we see this every year. Like all these people like say his, you know, things from I Had a Dream or whatever else and talk about this. You know, he and Greta has a new statue in Boston, which is hideous to me.
But that was like $8 million.
10. 10.
Not was
to
it
say
10?
That's any better. 10.
Like,
you know, but you know, but the idea is like if you love somebody, you will want to know everything about them as possible. So the idea that we only know really about 10% of what Dr. King stood for, I think needs to change. And I think we need to educate ourselves better into what he taught and really push that in terms of direct action, as many people, fortunately, online mentioned, as well as call out, you know, the injustices that prevent Black people, in our case, to have the liberation that we so desperately want.
Yeah. Hey, Lainey Peterson in the chat from Hardlands Media. He does what? Civically Minded? What day is that? Is that Wednesday? Tuesday? I can't remember when that is. I'm sure someone will tell me in the chat. People should go check out
so
her stuff over there.
Service is great. Yeah, so service is great. You know, community service is
Thursdays.
good. Yes. But you know, charity can only go so far. You know, so it's the idea of destroying the systems that cause people to want to do community service to begin with is what we need to talk
about. Speaking of direct action, speaking of,
we may not be able to do it.
Yay.
At least in the form of striking. We actually, not to say we sat on this for a while, but we probably were planning to do it last week, but then we had this other story that we felt took priority, so we kind of pushed it to this week. So this is actually an interview. Where'd it go? There we go. Nice. So this is an interview from In These Times, where CM Lewis interviews labor researcher Kate Brofenheimer about a case, and we'll talk more about it. Well, actually, I'll read through it. But the implications that can have as far as unions and therefore striking, you know, across the country. And given that we have a very conservative majority SCOTUS right now, it could be bad. So, so the interview, well, at least just to give context, go back.
Yeah.
Wait.
Sorry, I was trying to do this for you.
Yeah, thank you. The Supreme Court heard oral arguments January 10th in Glacier Northwest Incorporated versus International Brotherhood of Teamsters Local Union number 174, a court case that labor advocates says threatens the right to strike. The ability to withhold your labor is one of the most powerful tools throughout the history of unionization that has ensured workers can improve their working conditions. Teamsters General President Shawn M. O'Brien offered in a statement issued the same day. This right is now on trial at the Supreme Court, O'Brien said, calling on the court to affirm the rulings of lower courts. Noel J. Francisco, the Jones State attorney representing Glacier Northwest, did not respond to a request for comment. CM Lewis, working for In These Times, interviewed Kate Brofenheimer, Director of Labor Education Research and a senior lecturer at Cornell University School of Industrial and Labor Relations, about the potential labor implications of the case. The interview has been edited for clarity and length. So, Lewis, the Supreme Court just heard oral arguments in Glacier Northwest, Inc. versus International Brotherhood of Teamsters. What question does the case put to court? Brommenheimer. There's two questions. The employers sued the union for torturous destruction of company property and is going after the Teamsters. I'm basically going after the government, arguing under the takings clause that it has to be reimbursed for the property. The basic case is that when workers go on strike, by definition, the purpose of the strike is to cost the employer something economically. Our labor law balances employer rights and union rights. Employers can lock workers out, and unions can go on strike. When employers lock workers out, it hurts workers, and when unions go on strike, the idea is that it will hurt employers. If employers strike at any employer, if they don't do their work, most employers are going to lose some money. Glacier Northwest's argument is that cement workers going on strike caused some cement to harden when they walked off the job. Even though the workers left the trucks running in order to try to protect the cement, the company didn't get to the trucks in time to take care of it in time, and so the cement hardened. The company suffered losses, and because of those losses, the company is suing the union for torturous destruction of property.
There we go. Jesus.
Yeah, thank you. The National Labor Relations Board ruled that it was the company that committed an unfair labor practice by retaliating against the union for going on strike. That has to go before the full board, but had been declared a legal strike by the NLRB. And historically, the federal government does not interfere with NLRB cases, and the courts do not interfere in NLRB cases. Lewis. It seems like an important question is whether employees can go to the courts if they get an answer they don't like from the NLRB. Brommenheimer. The NLRB is empowered under the preemption doctrine with determining whether union conduct is protected by federal labor law like the National Labor Relations Act, and they also decide whether said labor law preempts the application of other law. In this case, the company is trying to go around that. Now, of course, companies can go to the courts, but whether they win in the courts is an entirely different question. We can see Amazon and Starbucks challenging every single decision made by the NLRB, challenging the legitimacy of the NLRB. But if we start to have a very active right-wing judiciary that starts to turn over precedent in NLRB decisions and court cases supporting NLRB decisions, we will be in very dangerous terrain. There is a great risk that this will happen in this case, and if it does, union workers will have a very limited right to strike. Lewis, what do you see as the broader impact for employer behavior if the Supreme Court sides with the company in this case? Brommenheimer, these cases get to the Supreme Court because federal courts in general have moved to the right. And so we get lower level federal court decisions, but then the Supreme Court gets to rule on them, which is the case in Glacier Northwest. The court has recognized that only one exception to the preemption doctrine, allowing employers to go to state courts, and that is, and it's kind of strange, only for extreme cases that are so deeply rooted in local feeling and responsibility that in the absence of compelling congressional direction, we could not infer that Congress deprived the states of the power to act. Up until now, the court has defined extreme cases as things such as picket line violence, intimidation, and coercion, but that did not exist in this case. The court has never applied that if a strike costs the employer money, then the strike is not protected, which is what the Glacier Northwest is arguing. And if that became the law, you can see that if airline employees went on strike, that cost the airline money. Or imagine the UPS strike. If the UPS strike moves forward and it costs UPS money because packages aren't delivered. Some of the packages contain goods that cannot survive in the heat or the cold and are damaged. UPS could hold the Teamsters liable for that. Unions, because of the costs of these lawsuits and the possible liabilities, would then be afraid to go on strike, and the right to strike would be severely limited. Very true. I'll just stop there for a second. Any thoughts, Reef, so far?
I mean, it's essentially like I mean, essentially, the NLRB is doing nothing to fight this.
Right.
And they're just kind of letting it happen, which we knew.
Right.
But, I mean, it's just kind of like, you know, it's interesting that the Supreme Court is now getting involved with this,
But
essentially.
this is the thing. It's not even so much the Supreme Court. It's more or less these lower level courts. So,
yeah,
you know, like during Trump,
they're pushing it up to the Supreme Court, essentially.
Right. But then, like, even in the lower courts, you know, like, have become more conservative. Like, we read of, you know, Hakeem Jeffries this week, you know, trying to nominate a judge that is anti-choice.
Right.
You know, Chuck Schumer a few years ago basically made a deal with what's his face? Turtle. Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell.
You know, to make a deal to fast track a lot of these federal judges in so that essentially they can go. So it's essentially like Democrats, when it comes to screwing over the working class, pay 4D chess.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but when it comes to like actual doing legislation that will help the working class, and they're just like, we can't do anything, you know, like it's this excuse and that excuse, but to screw us over, you know, so I think in a lot of ways, all the moves that people are not necessarily talking about, you know, in terms of like how underhanded the Democrats are, like we know fucking Republicans are shit, but all of that work that really goes under the radar, especially as far as mainstream media, ends up with stuff like this. That in turn kind of
moderate white liberal is in my head,
right?
But Brofenbrenner, that's that name.
Brofenbrenner. There we go.
Yep.
But anyway, let's continue.
Mm-hmm.
Zoom in, please.
Yep.
It seems likely that Labor could face tough rulings from the courts. What does a hostile judiciary mean for Labor strategy moving forward? Labor could go by any number of directions in how they respond. It could have the effect that Labor can get very cautious. Unions could start to decide that this is a time they shouldn't have major actions and strikes, and they should back off firing massive unfair labor cases, and instead, very much like the early years after Reagan came into office, unions kind of back off and became afraid of the strike. On the other side would be unions saying, you know, we know that this is political, and if we, in response to their decisions, create more chaos in the economy, strike more, engage in community campaigns, and get the public rallied about this, then the judiciary may start to feel the pressure, or the executive branch will push the pressure on the judiciary. We are at this moment where the Teamsters are planning a national UPS strike. Will an adverse decision in the Glacier Northwest case start to undermine that campaign? That would have huge repercussions for the labor movement globally, because a successful UPS strike will impact the global labor movement as it did in 1997. It will do so again. Add in that the court is doing this at a time when public support for unions is at its highest it has been in, you know, about 6 decades. This is not an ideal time to start getting worker rights. Like that they care. Is there an opportunity for labor to politically frame this question in a way that labor often has struggled to do? I think what is more important than trying to use it politically is to use it to organize and increase your power. Wow. Labor doesn't have enough power right now. In a recent issue of In These Times, Hamilton Nolan pointed out that in resources and amount of money, labor spends more on politics relative to other things. That's putting the cart before the horse. Labor doesn't have the power to make change politically, and will only have that power if it organizes more and builds out community and global alliances. When it builds that power, the political power will fall into place. Anything else that you think is important to mention? The attack on the public sector by the courts and legislatures is very significant. This was a strategic plan by some of the biggest corporations in the country. Recognizing the union's political power depends on having money and resources, and that public sector unions are active politically. While they failed in Ohio and Pennsylvania, they succeeded in Wisconsin and Indiana. These were states with strong labor movements, and that's gone. Companies like the Koch brothers and Koch Enterprises are being very strategic, and it's not new. We saw Coors Beer doing that in the 1980s. But the fact is, it is a much more effective and much more national strategy. I'm sure there are meetings where these guys all get together, and they're mostly guys, and say, okay, what state are we going to target next? Where are we going to file a court case?
That's it.
So that's it. But yeah, I think in terms of two things. So in terms of unions feeling, in a sense, helpless, definitely resonate with that. Like I know in my case, from my teachers union, like that's why they don't do much, because one, the money, to kind of attack, like in this case, our mayor and like other corporations, they don't have the money for that necessarily. So they have to be, so if anything, they're a lot more cautious in terms of how they do direct action that doesn't, put them out financially. So totally get that as far as unions. But what I think is also significant is that Barnhammer basically said, like, you need to build that community, that organizing. And I know you and Indy have talked about this even on a small scale, in order to elevate these issues, that the unions are able to have power, where they're able to defend themselves more politically, but then having the backing of the labor behind them to have more of an impact. And I think my biggest issues with unions, as we kind of saw with the railroad workers, especially with non-union leadership, is that they don't often use their base to kind of essentially do the work for them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's you gotta use what power you got now to get power. So strike while the iron's hot,
right?
If you will.
Right, but then it's like, and we talked about this regarding, Chris Smalls last week. You can't have a spokesperson for the union, essentially. Like, it's a team sport. So you have to involve the workers in your campaign, and other unions who can kind of come alongside in solidarity. And that's where the power politically comes from. And the fact that, Barbenheimer basically said, they have two choices, I think looking at it from more of the Supreme Court level, they can either just say, fuck this, like we're the elite, you guys are not going to do anything, so we can basically do what we say, or be fearful of what can happen if labor actually came together and actually made some noise. Yeah. So really, this article is basically saying, if you want to be able to have your right to strike protected, organize around it, you know? And I feel, but that being said, I fear, and again, it's definitely given a conservative Supreme Court, and they're bought off as well, it's going to go the other way, because we haven't seen much direct action. Like, I was hoping with the railroad workers there would be some, but I feel like right now that's basically dead.
Crazy how that works.
Now. So I feel like, but I feel also that's very strategic in terms of having workers feel despair, like, by politicians, that they're not charged to do anything because they feel like they essentially lose their power, which is a very sad case of affairs. But that also kind of leads into the fact that we don't have the social backups in terms of healthcare, in terms of unemployment, that in Europe, they're striking right now for many different reasons, and they are in solidarity with other industries right now. because they do have those socialist systems that they're able to fall back on. We
Mhm.
don't have that here, so we have a lot more to lose in terms of like how we're going to provide for our family, how can we continue to pay for our healthcare if, especially if we need, like healthcare, essentially. Like
Yep.
all these things we have to kind of consider that, like employers use to kind of keep us in line, which sucks. But again, as I said, I fear that SCOTUS is going to go the way of the corporations versus the way of workers, except if something happens now.
Yeah.
Which doesn't, not to be a pessimist, but doesn't offer much hope considering what's been happening over the last 2 months in particular.
We're
Lately.
fucked.
At least that's what. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Missy. We are.
Yep. So, speaking of direct action, our next story for this evening, Greta's German protest. I don't know if people have been watching the Twitters on this, but it's been good. It's been interesting. Been a couple of memes made from this already. So, police evict protesters from German village to clear way for coal mine expansion. 2 activists spent days in a tunnel they dug themselves as thousands of people rallied in the rain over the weekend. So this is by Julia Connolly over at Common Dreams. So the 2 activists, identified in media reports by their nicknames, Pinky and Brain, spent several days in a tunnel they dug themselves as thousands of people rallied in the rain over the weekend, and hundreds occupying the village, which has been depopulated over the last decade following a constitutional court ruling in favor of expanding a nearby coal mine owned by energy firm RWE. As Pinky and Brain left the 13-foot deep tunnel, which police in recent days have warned could collapse on them, contrary to assessment by experts, other campaigners chained themselves to a digger and suspended themselves from a bridge to block access to Lutzrath. But those demonstrations were also halted after several hours. So protesters and their supporters have condemned the actions of law enforcement authorities in the past weeks, as police have violently removed people from the site, including an encampment where about 100 campaigners have lived for more than 2 years to protest the expansion of RWE's Gosweiler coal mine. The vast majority of protesters were peaceful during the occupation. German Interior Minister Nancy Fraser said Monday that claims of police violence would be investigated, while also threatening demonstrators with prosecution if they were found to have attacked officers. If these allegations are confirmed, there must be consequences, said Fraser. Fridays for Future leader Greta Thunberg joined the demonstrators last week, condemning the government deal with RWE that allowed the destruction of Lutzrath as shameful, before she was also forcibly removed from the site on Sunday. So that's the story so far, Collin. Did you see pictures of Greta getting carried out? Did you see those?
What you put together. Yeah.
These right here?
Yes.
She's looking all like she found a new method of transport that's economical. You're like,
Sure.
If cops just carried me around, it'd be better. But I just wanted you to see, like, I had seen that, and then on Twitter today, I saw this. So it was a bit staged. I don't know if you had those paranoias in your head, but they looked a lot more congenial. Yeah.
Wie sieht's denn aus mit der Badstraße?
Just get a few pictures of your oppression, you know, and then I don't know, make a funny face for the camera.
Wait. Back up. Wait.
Yeah.
Back that up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait. Right there. And play.
Okay.
No, I just want to make sure.
Nike.
She has a Nike Fanny
pack. Yeah. Yeah.
So wait, so pause. She is for
yes,
like climate rights, like
Yep.
climate
Mhm.
change, like
Uh-huh.
activists for climate change, and yeah,
Uh-huh.
she's wearing a Nike
hand
I mean,
fanny pack. It's not even a fanny
Yeah.
pack. It's like an over the shoulder holder. You know.
like no, I just think
so-
that's
Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? Like, okay, right this way.
yeah.
Just so there's that. Can I just go to the next thing already? So she did speak, which we should probably let her words talk as well.
Germany is really embarrassing itself right now. I think it's absolutely absurd that this is happening the year 2023. The most affected people are clear, the science is clear. We need to keep the carbon in the ground. When governments and corporations are acting like this, are actively destroying the environment, putting countless of people at risk, the people step up. This is only a part of a global climate movement, and we stand together in solidarity.
So she was there. They're a disgrace, you know. Got to keep the carbon in the ground and whatnot. I mean, you got any thoughts so far before I move on?
She kind of reminds me of AOC in a sense. Like,
yes, invisible handcuffs. You mean
invisible handcuffs? It just seemed very like just with that clip you showed, it seemed very staged. You can argue, you know, like because how old is she now? She's what, 18?
Close.
I think so. Like
Between 16 and 18, probably.
Yeah, she's like so people in the chat, if you can check like her age, but I don't think they can rough her up, obviously. You know, that like given that she's somewhat of a celebrity at this point. So that could be a part of it, but like
sure.
You know, but I can also argue like for many activists who are around her age, especially if you're of color, you know, will not be as like carried so
And they're
softly.
probably you probably won't be available either to go to a protest like this. For
Right. The fact that she was able to travel to Germany from Sweden, which is not far relatively,
No.
but be able to have the means to do that, you know,
Yes.
kind of speaks to privilege.
Like I
you know,
believe in
that
her
she-
message. Yes, the carbon does need to stay in the ground, but also,
Right.
you know,
But again,
like,
it's the idea of like
who is
you know, yeah,
who's
you
responsible
mentioned-
for that
or- yeah,
damage?
But I know like this is the first time actually hearing that she is affiliated with an organization. I'm just curious to know who are they?
Yeah,
because
I don't know what her
because
ambitions
I just
are.
always thought like I just always believed that she kind of worked on her own volition.
Yeah.
You know, so the
Well, I know
idea
she's
so
done
actually
stuff.
makes me-
It's who she goes to and who supports her that's questionable. I know WEF kind of likes her because they push for that energy. You know, they have a whole hand in making that profitable for themselves, right? But you know, I don't know. I think that's why people are a little weird with her. You know, so
just seems like
and it's like who she like. It's all our responsibility, and she doesn't speak much on capitalism's responsibility,
right.
you know, and I think it's like
she says it, but then
Right. actionless
but doesn't
as far as
necessarily actively attack it or like
yeah,
encourages direct action really. Like she just goes in and speaks and leaves.
Yeah.
That's just kind of and she might get like a Twitter response from that or social media. And
well, and a
just,
lot of
like,
that WEF support it's bled out into Bill Gates support and stuff like that through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and its subsidiaries. Like, you know, money gets moved around and stuff. So, you know, like I mean, we've seen her speak at what was it, COP28 not that long ago, right?
I think so, yeah.
And like we talked about how that was, thousands of billionaires and millionaires flying their private jets into, like for a supposedly like save the environment convention, So, but to continue.
Before I respond to Yipper, like Yipper says you can go anywhere in the EU with a boat and a train right away. True. But that's still money.
Yeah.
That, especially given the state of Europe right now, in terms of heating costs, which relate to oil, gas, natural resources are being used to essentially heat your home.
Yes.
Like that's not something that people can readily do, at least definitely right now in Europe, unless you had the means to.
Well, and however you feel about, Greta, I to me personally, I feel like her passion is being used against her, in some respects, and being unaware, possibly naive of, who the villains really are, but that's just me.
Yeah.
But to continue, demolition of the village, right? Keep the carbon in the ground. So campaigners have warned that the expansion of the Garzweiler coal mine will make it impossible for Germany to meet its obligation to reduce carbon emissions, and have condemned the government, including the Green Party, for its agreement with RWE. Under the deal, the deadline for coal extraction in Germany was set at 2030. RWE's mine currently produces 25 million tons of lignite, also known as brown coal, per year. Extinction Rebellion demonstrators in the Netherlands said last week that the protest in the village is not so much about preserving Lucerath itself. It symbolizes resistance to everything that has to make way for fossil energy, while humanity is already on the edge of the abyss due to CO2 emissions. So, and that's Germany's really embarrassing self right now. Speaking of embarrassing itself, did you see Magical Mud Wizard Man, Collin, at this protest? So this was, here's Polizzi. They're all stuck in the mud, Collin. Oh no. Who will come to help them? Can I get... Jesus Christ, there we go. And... Magical Mud Wizard appears! Mud Wizard! Like... I love this video this week. Pigs in mud, says Scorchy. But the best part is, where's it at? Here, I think. So they finally get this one out. Wait for it, and push, and away! Mud Wizard away! Sorry, I just thought this was a great meme to bring. So...
All I can see, those are not American police.
No, you would have done got shot.
Yeah, people would have been a lot more rough than was here.
I mean, I think...
So,
the whole thing to me is like, what would, if it wasn't Greta, would they have like stopped for pictures? I doubt it.
No. No. Which, like, it's just the celebrity of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I just feel like if Greta was really a threat, I think overall she gets very favorable press. Which you can argue, and I saw in the chat by Human Love Solidarity, like she's young and she's speaking a good message, but you can also kind of juxtapose that with other activists who are doing similar things, who do not get as much favorable press in the media as she
Similar
does.
to how they've made Chris Smalls the union mascot. They've made her,
Right.
you know,
climate
change mascot, right?
So
which
it's
allows
just, and
anyone
again,
to
it's the
dismiss
idea
you.
of and again, it's the idea of having a spokesperson for these causes when it should be, again, this is a team sport. So the question is, it's like, who are the people who are working alongside Greta to help elevate these causes? As of now, and again, I'm more curious to understand a little bit more about this organization that she's a part of, or like she created. Like, what are they about? You know, where did they get their financing from? You know, so that could be something more we could maybe probably do a deep dive on. But you know, but that makes me a little more curious as to. And again, it's not to say that her intentions may not be true. It's just a question of whether her intentions are kind of warped into more corporate aspirations, or at least within the means that they're able to kind of almost use her to kind of talk a good game about,
manipulate, control.
and manipulate, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the cause that I think she genuinely does care about. So that's my concern.
Yeah.
Regarding.
Yeah. Not that she has much power other than visibility either. So, but
I mean, she gets good press.
Yes.
So, you know, so as I said, they can't rough her up too much. And again, this is Europe. They don't.
They already don't do that as much.
Right. So you know, so that's a given for her. But I think, you know, just she's this one young lady going to all these places just to speak. Again, valid, good, but where's the direct action? You know, in that, like, how's she using her voice to push for more direct? It's always like she's going to these places that are already kind of happening. I don't see her necessarily promoting these actions herself. And again, if she has an organization, again, this is the first time I've heard of them, where's their voice? You know? So that's all. You know, Indy's saying I would say what she did there was direct action. True.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it's for something. Like, I'll give her credit for being here. The stuff that it's the setup pictures and like all that stuff that's a little weird, you know? Yeah, I mean, but what is bringing press ultimately? Like, it should already have press, you know? Like, so whatever. I mean, it feels like a PR opportunity. I don't know how long she was there. Was she just there to do that and leave? Like, you know, didn't take her long to get out. Like, again, I'm not saying she's fucking, you know, a bad person, but, you know.
Right. But yeah, that's the thing with Indy is saying, like, how much people are talking about her versus the actual situation.
Or the other
and
two
what's gonna
activists.
happen yeah, that's the thing. It's like, that's the
Pinky
issue with
and the
celebrities,
Brain was there.
Right.
Like,
that's the issue. Like, no one was talking about them. Everyone
who've
was
been
talking
there for
about
like
Greta.
2 fucking years. Like,
That's
or all
the
the
issue.
other people that are there.
Right.
And
That's
she's
more
the only
the
one
issue.
that gets the press. And then she's easily dismissed because she's a child talking to fucking whatever. Like, you know, people are just gonna write it off of it as it's so, well, it's just Greta, it's a weird, it's how they use all these people, you know. So
Like, yeah, but it's the same thing. Like, you can argue with AOC or any members of the squad. They go in and kind of steal the thunder away from actual grassroots people who may be doing the work forever, and they take they basically steal the press.
Yeah.
You know, due to their celebrity, and then these stories are often ignored.
Well, and this is the
moved
thing
on.
that we've talked about with AOC, with whatever. How long before naivety is malice, right? Like, how long before you see multiple events like this, you know, where you start to all get sullied reputations, you know?
Right.
So, but whatever, you know, I think I'm happy they're protesting. I hope it works out for the protesters, you know.
Right.
So
Ultimately, we should be checking in with Pinky and Brain. You should clip that. You should do
yeah.
the soundboard for that.
Yeah, Pinky and the Brain.
But
Snarf.
yeah, but
but
you know, but yeah, like she definitely understands better
Yeah.
than probably most politicians. So I'll definitely give her that. But I think
Yeah.
it's the idea, and we kind of talked about this many times in terms of the celebrity overtaking the cause.
Yes.
You know, of actual grassroots activists that may not get attention otherwise that are being ignored. That's
Yes.
the issue that I have with this.
I agree.
You know. So,
but anyway,
not to say
I
she
think
didn't
that's
do good work, but that's the problem.
I think that's it for show tonight, fam.
Well, we for tonight.
Yes,
So
we have 2 clips coming up soon, so stay tuned for those. I'm trying to
but
think.
actually,
yeah,
we do have kind of a I wouldn't say short segment. Well, it is a segment, but so Fanto, if you're clipping this, you know, you can make this a 5th segment, I would say. So I actually wanted to show you guys this this chart. You might have seen it online before. I actually need to see where it is.
Yeah, I got it.
So I could pull it up. Thank you, Reef. So I think in light of so this is a equality, equity, justice table. So I think especially talking about with Dr. King this week. And actually I used this. I actually had my preschoolers last year kind of analyze this last year. But we talk about equality, equity, and justice a lot. And so, but I think in terms of thinking about it in terms of capitalism, like I just wanted to show you guys what capitalism means just in terms in a more simplified way. And again, it's very basic, but it should just give you an idea of like how these terms relate to the working class in particular. You know, so if you look at the first chart, where it's equality. So if you notice, you know, there's these 3 people watching a soccer game with a fence. And then, you know, everybody has the same size box.
Yeah.
But obviously this guy here can see due to the fact that he's tall, and so can this woman because she's about the same height. But this child cannot see because he or she is small. You know, so the idea here is showing that equality is basically the idea that everybody has the same thing, but it may not account for differences in people that might need extra. So if you look at the next picture, which is representing of equality. So as you see here, the man doesn't need the box because he's tall enough to see the game. Woman is the same, but then the child has 2 boxes to compensate for her height, his or her height, so then she's able to see the game. So this idea of everyone is getting what they need depending on the situation here.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I think in terms of like what we've said, you know, regarding unions, in particular, this is what this picture represents to me, like unions. Like, it's better than this on the left.
Yes.
You know, but, you know, but there's still a problem of, you know, the fence here, you know. So the last one, which is justice. So you notice that there's no boxes, but the reason why there's no boxes is because then now a chain link fence is installed so that everybody can see, you know. So this is representative basically of removing the fence that is preventing people of why there is inequality in the first place. So, you know, so I think, you know, hearing a lot about justice, you know, Dr. King was a man of justice. You know, what justice is is removing the constraints of capitalism, in my opinion, that everybody is able, in this case, to watch the game fairly.
Yeah.
And have a good time, you know? So, you know, just moving forward, I think, you know, when we talk about Dr. King or any revolutionary leader that we might discuss on this channel or anyone else, you know, or when people talk about justice, make sure that they're talking in terms of like how they're trying to eliminate the systematic barriers that prevent people from liberation versus like the issues, you know, which to me is what equality is. It's talking about the issues, but not necessarily the thing that of why those issues exist in the first place. And so, you know, just a small chart. If you want to find it, I will post it somewhere. I'll post it on Twitter probably soon, so that if you want to take a look at it and share it out, you can. But yeah, just a very quick thing I just wanted to share in light of our just really any discussion we've had on this channel, but I think especially with Dr. King.
Anthony Maleki,
So-
could we remove the fence entirely? Probably. Yeah, but then you
That
then you
too.
got to deal with all the like Brazilian stuff that's gonna run into your field while you're playing soccer. You know, like. But
So yeah, Jax, I'll definitely will post this on Twitter. So definitely, if you follow me, and by the way, if you want to follow us on Twitter, you can find us at our links below, as well as our other INN brethren on anynews.network. You can find all our links on Linktrees and all the things that you're
follow
able to
at Get Any News on
out.
Twitter. Keep an eye on all our schedules when we're putting stuff out. So clips up tomorrow, Friday, and the rest of these should go up there after that. So stay tuned. I'm trying to think if there's anyone we need to plug. I don't know if me and Indy are doing a show Sunday. We'll figure that out. So keep eyes on for that.
Well, deserve break. So Indy, you can let us know if you're going on.
No show,
Yep,
he
no
says.
show Sunday, take the night of.
Okay.
Jesse might go on next week.
Next Tuesday, yeah.
So definitely check out on Twitter for him. You know, support his new album, you know, that he has out on Bandcamp. I think really that's it. Tara just had the chairman Omali Yeshitilla
on. That was a great stream. Go watch that. That was
so please
fantastic.
go back and watch that and support the human movement as well. And then yeah, I think other than that,
that's it.
Just only
Cool.
us at this point.
Please clap.
Yes.
So, but
So yeah, Tara's live with Due Dissonance, so do a raid right now after you leave and support Tara.
Let them know we sent you.
Yeah, so please go over there.
But anyway,
and yeah, we'll put out a few extra clips of this over the next few days. So definitely as premieres, so definitely check this out, and we'll probably hang out and chat for probably all of them. At least one of us will. So
yeah, one of us will be there.
Definitely check this out over the weekend.
So anyway, as always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Bye. Have a great time.
Have a good day.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.